If you wanted to be a Hewlett operator, then you had to talk to different operators, and they would tell you what to look out for, what to do, and when you were running that machine, you had to know you had 4 levers, and you had to make sure that you knew what each lever was doing at all times. And you could take the Hewlett down, and you could rotate it from side to side. Sometimes you could run it backwards, sometimes you could run it forwards, and each thing was, you had to know that your depth perception going down into how much room you had, how far you were off the deck of the boat, and so it was something to learn.
Because I figured it might interest, future generations to come. And I just wanted to make sure how long it took for each vessel to be unloaded and how many problems we had in railroad or machine problem, which happened to be mine.
Well, the Hewlett was quite an amazing piece of machinery. It weighed 975 ton. It picked up 20 ton of grab. It handled all different sorts of iron ore, red ore, classifiers, sand ore, pellets, which is taconite, and blaine, which is another stone red ore that we unloaded. So it was quite a machine for the days. What closed the buckets was a big chain, as you can see, if it's still on the one that's behind me, and they were 11 links deep. They're probably an inch thick. And it was electric motors, a lot of horsepower, and also cables that went through cable wheels and closed and opened up the bucket. Tremendous amount of power. And they had their own power plant at the docks that ran Huletts.
Norman Milberg. I was employed on the A&B Dock for 33 years, from 1950 to 1982. Went down there with 6 other guys, and we stayed there and worked through all the good times and the bad times. I started at the bottom, and the jobs came up. I tried them out and was a bridge operator and a bridge oiler. From there I went to the unloading, when it was a gripper, laborer, then was a Larry car operator, weighed ore, then became a Hewlett operator, and was doing that to the time it closed the dock in 1982.
I worked in the office. I knew him. He ended up as the superintendent. He got me the job. I ran a tractor down in the cargo hold and pushing the ore to the Hewlett. In the days there was no boats, I was a welder and a burner. I'd be on repair work. Or else working in the shop.
I started as a laborer, and during my breaks, I was fascinated with big machinery and how the dock actually ran. So I would go up in the machine with the older gentlemen. They were like fathers to me because I lost my father so young, and I learned how to run a Hewlett. And then one day, when one of the old timers decided to retire, they needed a Hewlett operator, and you don't learn that overnight. And they found out that I knew how to operate it. They called me up from the labor gang, and I went up on the boat, got in the machine for the superintendent, and it took off from there. But you were in control of this big piece of machinery that not only closed this, you were on top of it, but there's this big leg that's about 80 feet in the air, along with the trolley that would go in and out, and you'd unload this bucket into a big hopper, and then they would weigh it and drop it into the railroad cars.
Yeah, for a while I rode with another operator, and then he says he told me to take over the controls. After I did that for a while, he said, "Set the machine down. You're on your own," and that was quite an experience to take that machine up and start trawling out over the boat.
It's been a while since there was a hook here, but I can grab onto this, and all we did was just like NASCAR. You would go in the machine this way. And there was a chair in here that swung from window to window. And there's 4 levers here, like I said. And this one carries you to the opening of the hole, okay? And then when you get in the center, you center this. This one right here, which it's stuck because somebody must get the button. This one's down because it's making your machine go down, okay? And then once you hit the iron ore, you center this, and then you throw this one, because this is what's opening the bucket or closing the bucket. Then you center this. Okay, once the bucket's closed, this is centered. This one's wide open because you're bringing the leg up. As soon as you get in the opening, you go over and you're trolleying in, then you center. Now, when you get really towards the end of the boat, you're not only going down with this one, you're not only closing the bucket and centering, you're not only doing this, you got this one because you're rotating. So you got this one wide open, this one the center. Once you get back vertical, this one's already centered, and then your trolley you're working.
Continuous cable on dock moving. There was 1.25 inch diameter. You had a device, you put it on that cable, and then had a smaller cable hooked onto the cars. And you pull the handle up on that, and then it would move the cars forward. And when you got through with the 8 cars, you'd go down and your partner was coming right in back of you. So he'd start loading.
From there, if you wanted to be an oiler, you went around and you had to climb around the machines, and you had to make sure that you were clear of all moving parts, and you had to keep the machines running. But the big job was the bridge operator. He had to move the bridge. He could move it a length of 1,000 foot on the bridge, and but he had to learn depth perception, where the bucket was at all times, and also had to worry about wind, rain, and all the weather conditions. So all in all, it was a pretty tough job.
I'm going to use for an example a boat or a ship that carried 25,000 tons of ore. Our operating time, unloading time is probably about 10 hours, a little bit over, maybe 12 hours on that. Now, the ore is loaded up to each hatches, onto the hatch cone, and the Huletts start in there, digging here, digging there, digging there. Eventually they come to the bottom, or to the tank top of them. Then by that time, the piles are small, you know. And that's when the bulldozer tractors come in. You know, he was a tractor, best job he ever had.
There was 4 shovelers to each Hewlett. You got to watch out for the Hewlett coming back down. But the Hewlett, the operator, he had a pattern. And we knew where he was going to come the next trip down.
Frenchie was my tractor man for many years, and so he operated that end of it, and he had to know where the Huletts were coming down at all times, and but he got to know my pattern, and we kind of worked hand in hand.
In a Canadian boat, and this kid they were sweeping up and want to get it all up because they were going to go after grain, and they had to wash the whole boat out. And that helmet there, the Hewlett came down and hit that little peak, and the hat come right off. He was that far from, he'd have been mush.
One of the big things was handling the tractors, and the tractor started under the Hewlett. You had to be able to push back the hoppers and go down onto the dock and pick up that tractor and the tractor man and bring it up to the machine and bring it out onto the deck of the boat. And then when you were done with the boat, you picked the tractor up in the hole and you landed it on the platform. And so it was quite a thing.
There was a lot of noise and the echo off of the steel. I wore those earmuffs. And I'm glad I did.
I lived probably 3 miles from work at the time, and we used to we had 2 shifts occasionally, and we always used to wonder if we ran out of railroad cars, empty cars coming in, so we could load them. And all I'd have to do is open up my door at home, and I could hear the Huletts running. It almost sounded like the Godzilla movie. They were that loud.
And to be a Larry car man, the Hewlett operator would bring up a bucket of ore, and you would weigh the ore, and you had a scale in the Larry car, and then you would put 2 to 5 dumps in each car, and then you would punch a ticket to make sure the weight was recorded, so that the railroad would know what you put in the railroad cars. And then usually we worked 10, 12 hours, maybe 14 on the Canadian boats. It took us a long time, 10, 12 hours, 14 hours. And it depended on the railroad, if they had the cars that we could make sure that we had enough cars to empties to load the iron ore into. And then if we didn't have a breakdown, the machines were subject to a breakdown. Cables could break, or gears could, electrical problems, anything could happen.
All night I sat with the first mate on deck, and we talked. And he told me what Frenchy said. He said, one of these days we are not coming back. And he repeated it, must have said it 100 times. He said, on the starboard side particularly, we have thousands and thousands of rivets that are loose. And if you know what a loose river, that will permit the plates to move. And he kept saying, as far as I know, they were supposed to go in a dry dock. That's 1974 spring. Somehow this is what he's telling me, somehow they finagled that they could sail all that summer and go in the dry dock in the fall. And it was done 9:30 a.m. Railroad, we had 23 minutes, 230 minutes delayed, and the dock we had 20 minutes delay.
We didn't have a boat that day, and we were working on the front of the dock. We were on the machines. There were some guys working on the face of the dock, and we heard this really noise. They had this boat in, and they were getting, as I take it, they were getting towards the end of the boat, and the operator went down in the hole. He was rotating, and he started up, and he didn't rotate back, and he caught the machine under the hatch combing of the boat, and then he didn't stop. He kept it on power up, and it broke the leg and the cables, and that was the end of the dock. They didn't repair the dock. They took the leg that broke off, and they took it up to Cleveland someplace, and then they took it out from there.
You could just see that the boats were getting bigger and bigger. They weren't maritime boats anymore that were really designed for the Huletts. They went from 10,000, 12,000 ton to 30,000. And they were getting bigger, wider, deeper. And then they were coming out with self-unloaders. And when you look at some of the 1,000-foot self-unloaders that would come in with 60,000 ton, they'd be in the dock and out in 5.5 hours. We did a 30,000 ton boat like the Bigley and the Sherwin, the Fitzgerald before it sunk in the Middletown. And it would take us 12.5 hours. That's if the machines ran good and we had railroad cars. So you saw the handwriting on the wall that automation just finally took the Huletts out.
There was good times, there was bad times, and we were laid off sometimes, but they all seemed to call us back, and so all in all, it was a good place to work.
Oh yeah, listen, I have been a sheriff of the county now I'm on my 25th year, and believe me when I say this, I'm proud of it. I'm humbled by it. I liked it. I still like it. But if the Huletts were running, I would have been there and given up a boss's position. It was just a job that I absolutely enjoyed. And I was fascinated with big equipment, and I was fascinated the way it worked. It was almost like a clock when you tore it apart. All the gears and everything was meshed. And once you learned it from the ground up as a you know, labor, then an oiler, then a bulldozer operator, to a Hewlett operator, it was just fascinating. And to this day, if I could have one in my backyard, not even working, I'd probably park it there, just because I'm still fascinated with it.